Welcome back, everyone. We're about to take a deep dive into a game that's all about speed, strategy, and those glorious, glorious crashes.
You make it sound like we're gonna wreck something.
Maybe we will. We're talking Joyride, that tabletop racing game where just knowing the rules is like the bare minimum.
Right. The official rulebook is our roadmap for this deep dive, and we're going way past just how to play.
Oh yeah, we're here to unlock the secrets to winning, so buckle up, everyone.
What I love about Joyride is how it takes that classic racing thrill, the speed, the competition, and adds this whole layer of strategy.
It's not just rolling dice and hoping for the best, is it?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
You're managing gears, you're playing items like a pro, and you're trying to outsmart your opponents while, avoiding complete disaster.
Okay, so paint me a picture here. What's a Joyride game actually live like?
Imagine a tabletop racetrack, right? But every decision you make on that track has consequences. You're not just going for speed, you're thinking about your position, you're trying to predict what your opponents will do.
And there are those inevitable crashes. You can't forget those. Part of the fun, right?
Oh, absolutely. The rulebook makes it clear that winning Joyride isn't about recklessness, it's calculated risk. Knowing when to hold back is just as important as knowing when to push your luck.
So before we hit the metaphorical gas pedal here, let's talk about setting up the game. The rulebook mentions choosing a track layout from the race guide. What kind of options are there?
Think of the race guide like your pit crew of track designers. It's got layouts for different numbers of players and difficulty levels, so it doesn't matter if you're a total newbie or a seasoned racer, there's a track that'll challenge you.
So there's something for everyone. I like that. Now, these layouts, they do more than just determine the shape of the track, right?
Oh yeah, way more. Each layout is going to have checkpoints and obstacles placed strategically.
Yeah.
You have to think ahead. You can't just focus on the car in front of you. You got to know what's coming.
Obstacles, huh? Not just barriers, but actual things on the track we got to deal with. I'm already intrigued.
Obstacles make things unpredictable. You might have this clear path, then bam, obstacle pops up, blocks your route. Now you got to make a split-second decision.
Do I try to squeeze by and risk a crash? Or do I play it safe and take a detour? Man, the tension.
That's Joyride in a nutshell. And don't forget those checkpoints we mentioned. They're not just markers. Some of them are how you get those awesome items that can totally change the game.
Okay, now we're talking. So as you're racing, you have to decide, do I go for the item or stick to the racing line? So many choices.
Right. Risk versus reward all the time. But before we get to all that, we got to pick our rides, the stars of the show, the cars.
This is where I'd spend way too long agonizing over which car has the best stats.
Well, in Joyride, each car comes with its own driver abilities, and they give you a strategic edge. You can go with the standard abilities, which are good all around, or you can dive into the unique sets, which are a little more specialized.
So, if I know I like to play aggressively, there's a car and an ability set for that. I love that. I can already feel that analysis paralysis setting in.
Don't overthink it too much just yet. The beauty of Joyride is that you can always switch things up in the next race. The real key is experimenting until you find what works for you.
All right, you've talked me down. I'll try to resist the urge to analyze everything to death. So we've picked our cars. What's next? Do we just line up and go?
Almost.
Okay.
We've got to factor in the initiative track, which is going to determine whose turn it is based on what gear they're in at the end of the round.
Hold on, gears. Are we really talking about shifting gears like in a real car?
Yep. Each car in Joyride has 5 gears, and how you manage those gears is like the heart of the game. That's how you control your speed, how you maneuver, how you avoid smashing into things. Well, most of the time.
Okay, now things are getting serious. So higher gear means more speed, but more risk.
Bingo. Higher gears, you can cover more ground, but it's harder to handle the car. Lower gears, you got more control, but you might end up trailing behind on those long straightaways.
I'm already trying to map out my strategy in my head. This is great. So we've got the track, the cars, we understand gears.
Yeah.
Are we ready to race?
One more step before we're off to the races, the rolling start. Everybody lines up at the starting line, rolls 2 dice, and moves their car forward that many spaces.
So those first 2 dice are like setting our initial speed then.
They set your speed and your starting gear. It's this really clever way. Joyride links your previous moves to your current options. You're always adapting.
I love that. So strategic, even from the very first roll. Okay, I'm officially hooked. Let's talk about what happens on a typical turn. What are the steps?
A turn in Joyride has 5 distinct steps. Start, lock, shift, roll, and end. And each step has a strategic decision to make.
All right, I'm ready to break it down. Let's start with start. What happens there?
Start is all about setting yourself up. You begin with the dice from your last roll in your rearview mirror, which shows your current gear. But here's where it gets interesting. Start is also your chance to use any driver abilities or items that you can trigger at this point in your turn.
Wait, so right from the get-go, we're already thinking about tactical advantages. I like it.
You're not just reacting to the board, you're actively shaping the race.
This is getting good. Okay, I can't wait to hear about the next step.
So the next step is lock, and this is where you actually start turning those dice into movement on the board.
Okay, so I've got these dice on my rearview mirror. What do I do?
You pick which dice you want to keep, up to 4 of them, and move them to these locked dice slots you have on your dashboard.
So I'm basically committing to how far those dice will move my car.
Yeah, it's all about balancing taking what you know you can get versus the potential of a big move later in the roll step.
Yeah, makes sense. But I bet those barriers and obstacles we talked about make this decision even trickier.
Totally. You have to think spatially. It's almost like a high-speed game of chess where every move has to account for the track layout and, of course, those other cars. Speaking of which, collisions.
Oh, yeah, the rulebook has a whole section on those, right? Different kinds of crashes.
It does. And each one has its own outcome. A side swipe, that's like a glancing blow. You rotate the other car out of your way, but you keep moving.
Okay, so I can nudge my opponent off course, but I'm not totally stopping them.
Right, more like a strategic bump.
Strategic bump, I like that. What about rear-end collisions? I'm picturing some serious chain reaction chaos here.
Rear-end collisions, that's where momentum matters. You slam into the back of another car, push them forward.
Sounds fun.
Yeah.
But there's got to be a downside, right?
There is. You got to have your remaining movement, so you're causing chaos but also slowing yourself down.
It's like a risk-reward built right in. Love it. Now, what about the most dramatic one, the head-on collision?
Head-on collisions are interesting. See, the player whose car gets hit actually chooses the outcome.
Wait, really? The person getting hit gets to decide?
Yeah. Either both cars immediately smash, which we'll get to in a minute, or they can treat it like a rear-end collision, but their car moves backwards.
So if someone slams into me head-on, I can choose to reverse instead of taking damage. It's pretty cool, actually. It puts some control back in the hands of the player getting hit.
Exactly. It's not just about the dice rolls. You have options even in those high-pressure moments. But when we talk about smashing...
Yeah, you mentioned that a few times now. What does that mean exactly?
Smashing is basically what happens when you push your luck too far. Hit a barrier head-on, you smash, chose the smash option in a head-on collision, smash! And it's not good. You stop moving immediately, your car takes damage, and your gear drops down to 0.
If that sounds bad. Year 0, like back to square one.
Pretty much. You're basically stalled until you can spend a turn shifting back up to at least gear 1, big momentum killer.
All right, so smashing is something we definitely want to avoid.
For sure. Which brings us to damage, because all those bumps and bruises have an impact on the game.
How does damage actually work in Joyride?
Simple. Damage tokens. You get those tokens, and you gotta put them on your dashboard.
So the more banged up my car gets, the more tokens I'll have.
Exactly, and they come from all sorts of places. Smashing into things, certain collisions, some of the items, and even if you use the engine brake to slow down quickly.
Engine brake. I'm guessing that's a risky move if it can cause damage.
It's a trade-off. You can use it to shift down 2 gears at once, which can be super helpful.
Yeah.
But if you're already running out of space on your dashboard, that extra damage token could really mess things up later.
So it's a gamble, a desperate move when you need to slow down fast.
Pretty much. And all those damage tokens, they don't just sit there looking pretty, they limit your options.
No, how so?
They can block your access to gears, your locked dice slots, even some of the item slots on your dashboard.
So all that early game risk-taking could come back to bite you later if your dashboard is full of damage tokens.
Exactly. It's a brilliant system, really. Makes you think twice about those risky moves.
Okay, so far we've got collisions, damage. What else can mess with my perfectly planned race?
Well, we can't forget about the items. You mentioned those earlier.
Right. Some checkpoints let you pick up items. Are there other ways to get them?
Yeah, you can snag items from these face-down tokens scattered around the track. Adds a little element of, exploration.
Exploration. In a racing game. That's cool. So do I detour to grab the item or stay focused on the race? Tough call.
Lots of tough calls in Joyride. But let's talk about the types of items. You've got dropped, fired, and activated.
All right, let's get tactical. What can I do with dropped items?
Dropped items are all about messing with the people behind you. You drop them behind your car as you go.
So like leaving a nasty surprise for whoever's trailing behind me.
Yep. Things like oil slicks to make them spin out or caltrops to slow them down.
That's devious. I
Yeah.
love it. Okay, what about fired items? Those sound even more aggressive.
Fired items, they're all about turning your car into a weapon, launching rockets to push other cars out of the way, or just projectiles to cause a little chaos.
I can imagine the look on my opponent's face when I blast them with a rocket. So satisfying. What about activated items?
Activated items are like instant power-ups. You use them right away. Could be a burst of speed, a shield to protect you, even something that changes the track itself for a little bit.
Oh, wow. So they're like wild cards you can play at just the right time.
You got it. Now, remember we talked about explosions. Those can happen with some items.
Yeah, explosions. That's where things get really crazy.
Explosions are a game changer. They affect a whole area around where they happen, damaging cars, forcing gear shifts, even destroying other items caught in the blast.
So not only do I have to worry about hitting other cars and those obstacles, but I also got to watch out for explosions. Man, this game has everything.
It's all about managing multiple layers of chaos, right? But sometimes you can use those explosions strategically. Take out a bunch of opponents at once, maybe clear a path through a crowded part of the track. Who knows?
All right, so we've covered collisions, damage, items. Is there anything else lurking in the Joyride rulebook that we need to know about?
We haven't talked about driver abilities yet. And there's those game variants and the whole custom track design thing.
Custom tracks. I can't wait to get to that. But first, let's dive into those driver abilities.
All right, driver abilities. They're like these little advantages that can really tip the scales in a close race. The rulebook talks about standard and unique sets.
Yeah. What's the difference between those two?
Well, standard abilities, those are like your basic toolkit. Every driver has access to those.
Okay, so they're like your all-purpose moves, no matter what car you choose.
Exactly. Unique abilities, those are tailored to each specific car. So they're going to be more specialized, maybe a little riskier, but with a bigger potential payoff.
So if I want to play it safe and have a solid set of go-to moves, I'd stick with the standard abilities. But if I'm feeling adventurous, I might go for a car with unique abilities.
That's a good way to think about it. It's like choosing your character class in a video game. Are you the sneaky rogue or the powerful but slow warrior? It all depends on your playstyle.
Man, I love how Joyride really lets you customize your approach. It's not just about following a set path. You can find what works best for you.
That's what makes it so replayable. Every race can be different depending on the car you choose, the track, the items, your opponents. It never gets old.
All right, let's get into some specifics. What are some examples of those standard abilities that everyone has?
One of my favorites is the handbrake turn. It lets you make a much sharper turn than normal, so it's great for dodging stuff or squeezing through tight spots.
So if I find myself boxed in by other cars, that's my escape route.
Exactly. Pull off a handbrake turn at just the right time, and you'll leave your opponents wondering what just happened.
I like it. What else do we have?
Well, there's the pit stop, which is all about recovering from damage. You can use it to remove a damage token from your dashboard.
So it's like hitting the reset button a little bit. I can see that being super useful, especially if you've had a rough start to the race.
Yep. It's all about managing risk and reward, right? Do you go all in on a risky move, knowing you might need a pit stop later? Or do you play it safe and save your abilities for a crucial moment?
So many tough decisions. Okay, what's the third standard ability?
The third one is slipstream, and this one's all about taking advantage of the car in front of you.
Oh, like drafting?
Exactly.
Hmm.
If you end your movement right behind another car, you can use slipstream to move one extra space.
So if I'm trailing behind the leader, I can use Slipstream to get that little extra boost and maybe even overtake them.
That's the idea. It's a subtle ability, but it can be really effective if you use it at the right time.
All right, now I'm curious about those unique abilities. What are some of the craziest things you can do with those?
Oh, man. There are some wild ones. Some cars can, like, place temporary obstacles on the track to mess with everyone else. Others can get a massive speed boost for a short time, or even teleport.
Teleport. Okay, that's just cool.
It's Joyride. Anything can happen. Each car is unique, and those unique abilities really make them stand out.
You mentioned that most abilities need to recharge after you use them. How does that work?
Most ability tokens have these little lights on them that show if they're ready to use. Once you activate an ability, you flip the token over and it needs to recharge. And here's the interesting part. They recharge when you complete a lap ahead of other players.
So if I'm in first place, my abilities recharge faster. Man, that's clever. It encourages aggressive play and rewards those who manage to stay ahead.
Joyride is full of little design choices like that, you know? Everything is connected. Everything matters.
It's not just a random dice rolling fest. It's about thinking strategically and making the most of every opportunity.
Exactly. But let's not forget about those game variants the rulebook mentions.
Right. You said there was a teams mode.
There is. You play in pairs, 2 cars per team, and the first team to get one of their cars across the finish line wins the whole thing.
So it's all about teamwork and coordination, not just individual glory.
Exactly. You got to think about your teammates' position, their abilities, how your moves are going to affect them. It adds a whole new layer to the game.
I bet it gets pretty intense. Are there any other variants worth mentioning?
The rulebook also gives you options to simplify the game a bit. You can take out certain mechanics like the initiative track or damage or even the items altogether.
Oh, that's a good idea, especially
Yeah.
if you're playing with younger kids or people who are new to tabletop games. You can ease them into the full experience.
Exactly. It's all about making sure everyone has fun, no matter their skill level. But for those who are ready to go all out, there's the ultimate Joyride challenge. Custom track design.
Yeah, we can't end this deep dive without talking about that. What kind of crazy tracks can we create?
Well, that blank side of the game board is your canvas. You can lay out the track however you want, place checkpoints, obstacles, item tokens. The possibilities are endless.
So I can basically create my dream racetrack with all the hairpin turns and chicanes I can imagine.
The rulebook even has some tips on how to make a good track, making sure it's balanced and fun to race on. They talk about different starting line positions, checkpoint order, how to use items to create different routes. It's pretty in-depth.
This has been awesome. I'm so glad we took this deep dive into Joyride. I feel like we've only scratched the surface of what this game has to offer, but it's definitely got me excited to get behind the wheel.
Me too. I hope everyone listening is feeling inspired to try it out.
And if you're already a Joyride fan, well, maybe we've given you some new ideas to spice up your next race.
So, gear up, choose your car, and get ready for some high-octane tabletop action.
Until next time, keep on racing.